Hello everyone and welcome back to Bootstrap for Cash. I think this is the first time we mention our name of the podcast, right, Giorgio?
It's the first time we know, right? The last time
Actually,
we started
yeah.
recording and we didn't have a name yet.
That's true. Yeah, in the first episode, we didn't know the name of the podcast. Giorgio came up with it afterwards. So yeah, this is the first time we introduce ourselves like real name, right? So it's good to have a name. And today, the idea is to do a summary, a catch-up about unit tests, how it's going. Especially this week was quite special because Giorgio had to work alone most of the week, and we will come into details afterwards. And I would like also to talk about two buzzwords. Well, actually, it's more than one word, so I would say buzz concepts. One is vibe coding, and the other one is model context protocol, or you might have seen it like with the initials MCP. So let's get into it. So first, Giorgio, how are you doing?
Oh yeah, not too bad. I spent the week doing unit text. Actually, I wanted to do more things, but I was, when you get very focused, so I was in the tunnel and I was trying to get that done. But it feels like we are getting there.
I have a question for you afterwards. I will do a question related to vibe coding to you, but let's stick to the plan. So a good friend of mine came to visit me this last week. He told me if it was a good moment to come by, and I said it's probably the worst moment in my life right now for you to come. But lack of filter on my side, but I think he appreciated that I'm being honest, and I told him, but look, just come, take the tickets, buy the tickets, come to Switzerland, because probably if something works out of this thing, we will be so busy at some point once we have customers and so on that it will be probably harder for you to visit me.
It would be even worse, right?
And it's always a bad moment, right? So I was thinking, let's just do it. So he came, we had fun, he visited Switzerland, but the problem with that is my good partner in business, Giorgio, had to work for almost a week alone. How was it, Giorgio, for 1 week working alone?
But it was fine. As I said, I got in the
tunnel anyway. So you don't need
me
at all. That's the conclusion. Okay, ciao guys.
Yeah, but I think we already had good plans on what we wanted to do. So I think we had discussed most of the details. So yeah, well, I had to try out a thing or two. So I started like developing against a specific service. I started with Cloudflare D1. I wanted to do this database thing, which it was fine per se. It worked, but then I realized maybe I don't need it, so I dropped it. But we had already settled on Paddled. We had already settled on Clark. So I think pretty much everything was decided already. Fired up Cursor. Finally, I finally subscribed to it. Actually, I was still using trials, and
we will come back to that in a moment.
On and off with other things as well. Copilot before, but this was very different. So it was a strange week. This week, I went down 100% on the vibe coding thing, since Cursor was my sparring partner. Since I was always discussing things just with Cursor, or rather with Claude, right? The model behind.
But before we get into vibe coding, let's go back to unit tests. So I would like to do a weekly product catch-up so that we can discuss the progress of the product and what next. It's also important for us to plan the week, right? And let's do it for unit tests, but in the future, if we have more products, we can also do it for those products. So you said that you were playing around with D1, the database solution provided by Cloudflare. And so what's the current status of the product? Where are we at?
So to sum up again, we initially released unit text as a library and open source library and CLI. And we now decided to make it available to anyone, not just developers. So we're turning that into a SaaS product. In particular, we're doing a Chrome extension right now because we feel like that's where most users would be. Everybody is doing things on the browser, so it's a good starting point. And what I did last week was focused entirely on the SaaS offering. So, we need to do billing, obviously, because we need to make this sustainable. Authentication, so you can have an account. Maybe in the future we can then introduce organizations, teams, or whatever you want to do. So that's why we used a very nice authentication service, which we already mentioned. And we needed to do this API for the Chrome extension. So I think this sums up what I've been working on.
And so you decided not to go with the database solution from Cloudflare. So what are you using to persist the data?
Yeah, so we realized, we decided to do a fairly simple subscription plan. We didn't go wild, we didn't go like the AWS route. It's a fairly simple subscription plan. We've got a couple of options for different needs, and we have a trial period initially on sign up. So in the end, we have 3 options, you could say. We have some credits that run through the month to do a few tests on your text, depending on the plan. And as I said, initially I started designing the database to keep track of everything, because let's break down how it works. So on one end, you've got authentication. Obviously, you need to be authenticated. You need to be a user in the system in unit text so that you can do anything. Then you can buy a plan, and it goes through Paddle, so our payment provider.
Mm-hmm.
You pick your plan, enter your data, and then we get back a message from Paddle. We get a webhook, it's called. So Paddle tells us, hey, this person subscribed to that plan.
Mm-hmm.
Now, what we need to do is, in our API in unit text, we need to track the fact that somebody paid for a specific plan for that month or for that year, and we track that against that specific user, right? You signed up with a certain email address, you paid, and now we link the plan together. And of course, we also need to handle cancellations, or account deletion, or whatever. What I realized at some point was just I was coming up with this huge schema and tracking transactions and trying to track everything myself. Mm-hmm. And then at some point I just realized I already got Paddle, I already got Clark, I've got everything I need. Why don't I just use their services? So I get the data from Paddle, I've got my authenticated user, I've got very little metadata that I need to track. What subscription you have, when it's expiring, what's your credit balance, which then is used as you use the API, your Paddle customer ID, if you like.
Mm-hmm.
So I just associate that with a user, and that's it. That's all we need. Now, when you are authenticated, you've got everything you need to reconcile, let's say, the data from the subscription and into our system, into unit text. So it's very simple, very elegant. We don't need to waste too much space on data. We don't need to waste money on database even. It's part of the service we get from Clark, and it's approved by them. They can support up to 8 kilobyte metadata, if I remember correctly, from the docs per user, which is obviously not we need. So much
for
less
simple
than
solution like ours is enough, right?
Absolutely, I think it's perfect, and we keep things simple, keep things cheap. It's scalable.
Sorry, as a new user, do I get a free trial?
Yes, that's the idea, right? So we the moment you sign up, we already associate some 3 credits, so at least somebody can try out unit text and quickly get an idea of how it works, if it's suitable for them before they actually pull out their credit card.
And what is a credit?
And a credit is a review, you could say. It would be every time unit text goes through through your text, through your blog post or whatever you wrote, that would be a credit. So that's what we think is the simplest billable unit for this kind of service.
And is there a maximum? Like, imagine that I have a book that I want to review. Is that feasible?
Yeah, well, we should mention that as well. That's a good point. So we also have some character limits. Right now we have, let's say, a hard limit on 10,000 characters. It's a hard limit more because that's what we tested so far.
And we don't know, really.
You could do more, obviously. We know that there are models that could do more very easily. Like, take the Google models, Gemini, but they're not the only ones. There are many models now that go 128,000 in context up to, well, actually, Gemini is millions of tokens. I don't remember.
They went nuts.
It's really absurd. So we know that there are ways to do that. It's just that we don't see the use case yet. Also because, well, you wouldn't copy paste a book in the Chrome extension. But of course, if somebody came and that's their use case, we could adapt to it. We need to change the user experience a bit. We need to
contact us, basically.
Use other models. But absolutely, if somebody wants to do more, can contact us. We are very happy to grow this. I should mention one of the features I worked on right now, even though it's not really shown yet. It's not part of the interface yet, but should be pretty easy now to extend. Is to make it possible to have different models, different templates, let's say, so that if you're writing an email or a blog post or, I don't know, a podcast script, then you can have different structures, different goals, different questions that you base your review around. So we could also integrate that fairly easily, I would say. It's probably one of the next steps. And again, if somebody wanted more, they could contact us and we could extend it.
So one conclusion that might be interesting for those out there that are trying to find a payment provider or a billing provider, if you're considering Paddle, just keep in mind one thing that we struggle with, which is they're quite flexible in general, but when it comes to credit-based billing, is quite restricted, right? So that's why we decided to just go with subscription-based billing with Paddle. And then we had this, you would say, happy idea of tracking the credit-based trial directly in Clerk, right? So you don't have to configure Paddle to do this trial because it was not coming out of the box and it was quite complicated to do. So we did this workaround.
Yeah, I'd say what we did is the simplest thing we could do. From what I could saw, look, we are not experts in Paddle, obviously. So if a Paddle solutions architect comes up, then maybe they will have better ideas. But looking at docs, I feel like, and it's fair for them, right? So they focus very much on their part, which is handling the payment, handling taxes, which is also something really very nice that they do. We should also mention that. So we pick them over, for example, Stripe, so that they just handle all the taxes for us, the reporting, all that different compliance currencies. Stuff. Different currency. I mean, it's just the two of us, so we cannot handle all of that. Stripe can also handle that in some capacity, but it's either you go through Lemon Squeezy, which is also a service of theirs, or through some other setups that you need to do. But we didn't have time. We wanted to be fast, get it quickly to the market. So obviously, Paddle focuses very much on that. They don't focus as much on the actual intricacies of billing, of SaaS billing or API billing, where you can go crazy on your pricing model. It's really not their core business. There are other solutions. Maybe we will evaluate some at some point. Maybe we will build one at some point.
Unless Paddle wants to promotion this podcast, then we will not be competitors. So
maybe we build something specifically for paddle.
Yes.
I don't know, but I feel like there are some options. There are even some very nice open source options, I would say. At this point, we didn't want to self-host too much infrastructure, let's say. One was this Lago, I think it was.
Yeah,
it
Lago.
Looked very nice. I think, again, based on what I could see on the docs, it was pretty nice. Also the code, because again, it is open source, but we don't feel like this is the right time to start deploying large you needed quite a bit of infrastructure to self-host. And apparently the pricing, the contact us pricing, is also way too expensive for us right now. So we can't do that. No, I'm not a big fan of it. Whenever you get these cloud services and you need to contact them, you already know where it's gonna go, and I don't know. I feel like it's too high of a barrier. I understand why they do it. Obviously, I mean, they're probably very busy building their service already, and offering a cloud service, it's not easy. It's not as easy. I did it before, right? At Avaloq, we built exactly that, a self-service, fully automated cloud offering, like hosting the old database and surrounding services and API, and its stuff. And even there was a bit of manual intervention, not so much in the let's say in the deployment process, or at least in the verification before we actually handed out the free instances. It was a bit of manual verification because it was also very expensive for us as the hosting company. So giving out free trials for cloud services, it can get pretty expensive pretty soon. So I understand them for not doing that.
So let's get into one of the buzz concepts, which is vibe coding. Everybody's talking about it nowadays. You have like different sites. Well, actually 2 sites. One of them is like you cannot live without it right now. And the other side is like, yeah, well, good luck maintaining whatever comes out from that. And I want to talk about our personal experience. I personally am happy that AI can do much of the work nowadays, but it's true that sometimes it can get quite wild. And my personal experience was yesterday, for instance, I had to review Giorgio's code after 1 week of work with Cursor. And he checked some parts of the code. It's like, Giorgio, why are you doing this? He was like, well, maybe we can use it in the future. It's like, exactly, maybe. So I guess when you're working with a perfectionist that was already willing to go wild with his own code, now giving this tool to him, it can get pretty wild. And so, Giorgio, what's your experience with vibe coding and Cursor?
Okay, it's actually really strange, and it's a very weird feeling, to be honest. I had to put away the perfectionist part, actually, or let's say I felt like doing it that way. You could say it was a bit of an experiment. So some parts of it I just let Cursor go wild. Some others I did most of it myself. Some I did everything myself. In fact, I didn't let it do any of its things. Whatever I thought it was the most sensitive, or it was around some specific parts of the subscription management, I tried initially. So let's say it's all a learning process for us as well. Well, it probably is for anyone, right? I mean, even that this term vibe coding is kind of new. The way also these tools work keeps evolving. It's really wild if you think where we've gone. Think about, I mean, is it like 1 year back? I think around 1 year back, I got my first subscription to GitHub Copilot. Slightly more.
We paid for it, and now it's for free.
We paid for it, and now it's free actually. and it's also not comparable to Cursor. It's a completely different level. But again, think about it. first we got autocomplete. In fact, if I already think back, like a few years back, I remember moving from like Eclipse or even NetBeans, it was before, to like IntelliJ in
Turbo Pascal
2015. How much autocomplete changed? Like the smart completion actually completed what you wanted to do and not give you some random function somewhere that you had no idea what it did. Auto imports, it really felt wild.
Mm-hmm.
And now going from that to Copilot, where maybe you write a comment or the name of your function and it gets auto-completed, the whole body of the function, like you just need to write in your code that you intend to do something, and then Copilot comes and does it for you. That was already a pretty crazy feeling. Hopefully right. That's a fair point. Hallucinations were already a thing.
Yeah,
if you're doing more complex things, it would just bail out and give you the function body, and inside it would panic or give you a to-do. So giving it back to you, say, okay, please implement it for me. Which, okay, it was like, say, a very junior employee. But now Cursor is also on another level. And I feel like it's going to continue this route. So just pretending this is not happening, pretending it's not there, or just saying, oh no, this is horrible, this it makes too many mistakes, which it does, or no, it will make us stupid, which may also be true. There are many cons. There are many cons. Or lazy. There are many cons.
I feel more lazy now, to be honest.
Yeah, it's a weird feeling, right? You feel like, why put in that hard work if you can write a message and it does it for you?
I see on LinkedIn this last week a post of the other side of the spectrum, the ones hating vibe coding, I guess, because they feel threatened by all those wannabe developers or vibe coders. And he was showing 2 screenshots of another post from LinkedIn, I think it was. And it was a guy, a non-developer, doing vibe coding, like saying, oh, I came up with this product in 1 week, and now I'm doing I don't know how much money, and so on. And then in the next one, he was showing, shit, everything is exploding, and my customers are leaving me. I don't know what to do. I'm not an IT. I don't know if it's fake, because nowadays you never know. It could be fake. But it was quite funny to read. And another fun fact I wanted to tell you about, guys, is the first sentence from the PR from Giorgio. It's he opened the PR like, I don't know, this week, and the first sentence is, wow, this is horrible. So much AI code. I don't think I'm able to review all this stuff. So yeah, you just leave it to me. Thank you. What a nice present.
At that point, you get too far, and that's something I always review my own PRs. The moment I open them, obviously I wrote the code, and I saw all the diffs, like one after the other, but maybe it's 3, 5, 10 commits. And I realized I took it too far.
This one is 13 commits.
When did I write all this stuff? It was like, I think it was 1 day of work, or like
3 days
it
ago.
felt like, yeah, and it was
not that bad, to be honest. It's only 33 files changed. I mean, we've done worse, much, much worse. I mean, remember those PRs, most of the time from myself, like 200 different resources changed. And back then, we didn't have AI to do anything. That was me, like hardstyle. And you had to review these PRs, and it was kind of doable in a way. Of course, you had to skip some stuff. But these 33 files yesterday, for me, it felt like, oh my God, I think I'm dying. And I don't know why, to be honest. I don't know if it's AI or I was too tired from this last week. Like, visiting the whole Switzerland and driving around and all that. I don't know if it was because of that or a combination, but it was only 33. And it was really hard to review, to be honest. And not because of you, obviously, because I reviewed your code in the past and it was easy, right? Because
but this is not 100% my code, I guess.
Exactly.
And that's also, it's part of the weird feeling, I have to say. So especially using Cursor now, again, I'm trying to learn like what are the best tools, because it's not just one tool, it's a mix of tools, right?
I wanted to ask you that too. Why did you go with Cursor instead of Continue? Because I remember you were also telling me about Continue some weeks ago, that you were giving a try to the tool. Why did you end up using Cursor and not Continue?
To be honest, I didn't do a very thorough analysis, but I was just testing them both a bit, and I was using Continue with local models. That was a bit that's what the big difference. I wanted to try out using just local models versus using a like out of the box solution. And Continue was also pretty good. I was of course a bit messy to set up because I was trying to run models locally, which actually worked fine, although it was using a lot of battery. It's running like DeepSeek and Quen, and I don't remember how many models on my MacBook, which is powerful enough, but it's still an M1, so it's a bit old already. It was consuming a lot of battery, and at some point I just realized Cursor was faster, and I didn't have time to waste. I just wanted to get things done, and I think the price tag associated with it was fair enough. So I thought, okay, let's go to that. Probably what I think I will do this year is I paid for Cursor, and I don't think I will renew my JetBrains subscription, to be honest.
Oh, that's a hard thing to say. I mean, you're a JetBrains lover.
I like them very much. I like what they do very much. I like their tools, but
I've never paid for it, to be honest.
You never paid for many things.
That's true, yes.
But I just don't feel, well, on one end we need to start making money, so I cannot splurge on whatever. But I feel like Cursor is already bringing more value, and much more value than JetBrains. Obviously, that's the thing, right? Also, the nice thing about Continue would be that you can use it in JetBrains IDEs or in Visual Studio Code, whereas Cursor is built on top of Visual Studio Code. It is its own thing. It's not an extension. It's its own thing.
Which is, for me, it's a pain, right? Because I need to, for the Pretty Progress app, which is built in Android with Kotlin and on Android Studio, I need to change the IDE, ask the model, then get the results, and then review them on Android Studio. So I need to change between two IDEs, which is a bit of a pain. I mean, it's not a killer, but still a bit of a pain. So yeah, hopefully they will create a plugin also for JetBrains.
Or probably and I think there are some extensions for VS Code to do Android development.
Yeah, probably.
Maybe they're not too good yet, but I feel like maybe those are going to get better, probably, as more people move to it. But again, I think we are still learning. Maybe new services will come up, right? Maybe somebody else will come up with new options after Cursor. So it's definitely not game over. Definitely, I don't feel like they've already won. But it's already quite different from what we had before. Like, I never understood this idea of chatting to discuss code. Not in Copilot, at least it wasn't too good. But if you take, for example, the way Cursor works, how we can scan through your code and get relevant files, and you can link to the specific documentation you want. For example, I started indexing Paddle and Clerk. You can ask them to index the documentation that you need. You can ask it to launch commands in the terminal.
Yeah.
And get feedback from it, and then do other things. So this agentic mode is absolutely wild. Like, write something, then you will do PNPM test and see the test results and fix accordingly. And you just need to go approve, run command.
Now that you mentioned agents or agentic, let's move to the next topic, because I think we are already half an hour. So our time is already half an hour past. So I think this one is a bit more complicated to discuss because it's more technical. And that's a Model Context Protocol, or MCP. That's the other buzzword or trendy concept that is going around, and many people on LinkedIn and different platforms are talking about it, like the Holy Grail. Grail. Sorry. So maybe we can give some context right here. So first, we all know, like if you're a standard user, we all know the initial thing was kind of ChatGPT, right? Like the chat-based interaction with a smart chat, where you do a query and the query goes to the model, and the model produces some response that you get on the view, right? Then some guy in the Meta AI research score called Patrick Lewis came up with this concept called RAG, Retrieval Augmented Generation. Maybe we can talk about that as well, because it seems now many people are explaining they are one versus the other, but I think it's not exactly like that.
It's not like that.
It's not like that at all. So I think we can discuss that too. And then Anthropic came up with this concept Model Context Protocol, MCP. This is quite new compared to the others. So yes. Let's try to give some context about, for instance, let's start with RAG. What is exactly RAG, or Retrieval Augmented Generation?
Yes, I think we should mention RAG. I think we should also mention somewhere in between. I wouldn't know where to place it in this timeline. Tool use. The idea of letting a language model use tools or call functions. This is also crucial in it. You could place it before RAG if you want. I'm not sure about the timeline, to be honest, but they're kind of often implemented in combination, you could say. They could be implemented in combination, although not necessarily. So RAG, Retrieval Augmented Generation, the core idea about it is that the language model per se is a probabilistic model, what we always say, right? So it's got certain probability that after that word or after that token, there will be another token. And because it's trained on so much data coming from wherever, let's not go into the details of where the data comes from. Thinking about Meta and their legal issues right now. But wherever the data comes from, the highest, let's say, you would imagine that you've got the highest chance of generating some text that resembles real facts. So to simplify a lot, if you've got 100 documents in your training corpus about a specific, let's say, legal thing, and 90 of them say that this law means X, and another 10 documents, let's say, this law means Y, you have a much higher chance of getting this law means X, because it was 90% of it. Sometimes you may still get the other one, because again, probabilistic and rolling the dice and temperature and all many things we don't want to get into the details now, but let's just say it's a much higher chance that you get the first one. This law means X. It was the most likely outcome. However, maybe the reason why there is another 10 documents saying this law means Y is not because they are wrong. Maybe it's just because they are more recent. Maybe it used to be that was the law. Maybe for 50 years that was the law. And then it changed, and now it's Y. Now, if a human with actual understanding of time and
the
context of how legislation works, then they would say, okay, it used to be like that, but since this year, then it means something else. And this would be then considered maybe an hallucination or the model being wrong. Or yet again, take another case. Maybe the model was trained before this law even changed. So you've got 100%, your model is saying, oh no, this is 100%, this is how I want to complete this, because this is what my training corpus said. And so you get errors. So this is the problem we are trying to solve with retrieval augmented generation. Or it's one of the problems you may want to solve. You want your model to write about something that it doesn't know about, or it doesn't know about, let's say, with enough confidence. Now, what we want to do is basically take some specific topics, some data, maybe something from a knowledge base, or something from, as we just said, like a country's laws, something like that. So maybe we want some specific laws in our context. We want to give it as an input to our model, together with our prompt, together with the question we are asking, whatever you are asking the model to complete. We can give that as an input. We can say, look, I want you to work on this specific law that came out last year. It's not in your corpus, so just stick to what you have in your context, in the chat, in the prompt that you give to the model. And this is my question. This is what I want you to elaborate from that. And now you get much better results, because whatever the model is doing is now generating it as part of your context, so it's part of the prompt.
So could we say that retrieval augmented generation, or let's call it RAG, is too long, the name. Actually, the Patrick Lewis was saying like it was not really the best name. But yeah, if could we say that RAG is a way to give context to a certain model, so the model learns about it without training that model on that specific data? So you could save all the training, so meaning all the resources consumed to train a model, and we know it's a lot, and not many people can do it with their own laptops, so you need to do it on the cloud or with powerful GPUs. So all this surrounding resource consuming thing can be avoided by using RAG.
Yes, and it's not just that. It could even yield better results than even trying to train a model on that specific thing. Let's say, and let's take the same example we just mentioned now. Imagine you already had 99 pieces of data or some stuff, whatever you had in your corpus, telling you the old thing. Now, if you try to fine-tune on one new document, it's not going to make much of a difference, most likely. Maybe, I'm sure whoever is doing those fine-tunings, they can do smarter things, but there is a high probability that's not enough. When you do a fine-tuning, you need loads of data. You still need loads of data, not as much as training from scratch, obviously, but still, you need data. But if you can give that same data in the context, you get much, much better results. You get very specific results. And in particularly, RAG then brings us to the last point, which is when I was a bit diverging. I was talking about tool use, function calling, whether it makes sense to mention here or not. In general, you could say RAG is the concept of actually retrieving the data. Like, what should I inject in the context that will make my request more relevant? And now, again, let's try to simplify a lot, because we had this example going. Let's assume I'm building an app which has legal text from many countries, and I ask a question specifically about the way something works in Switzerland. Now, one thing the model could do, and this would be our RAG functionality, the retrieval part of it, the LLM could identify and say, oh, okay, so the question was about Switzerland. So it's not the user copy-pasting the entirety of Swiss laws into the chat. That would be a bit prohibitive. Maybe it's even going above the context, so it's too much stuff. The LLM could not process it. But the way it works is whoever is providing this service has already indexed all the laws of all relevant countries and maybe segmented that in a way that makes sense. Like you've got the different pieces, and it creates and they created some sort of indexing. Usually embeddings. So usually you use embeddings to go from whatever query you add to the most relevant parts, the most relevant context, or the most relevant data in your knowledge base, that then at runtime, when the query is being generated, will be fetched from your knowledge base. Say, okay, so this is about Switzerland. The question was about taxes, right? So you will get something from the tax code of Switzerland, take it, put it into the context, into the actual prompt, put in the user questions or some way another formulation of the user question, and that's it. That's retrieval augmented generation, because now we will get a response, the generated response. But it's not just being produced out of thin air, if you like, but it's actually augmented by the data I'm giving you right now. I'm giving right now to the model as context, as part of the context. So you get better results. You don't need to fine-tune. You don't need to go on do a new training. In the end, it's much cheaper, very flexible.
You mentioned before the concept indexing and also the concept embeddings. I think these are key to distinguish between RAG and MCP, right? So there is some offline pre-processing before you start using or executing a RAG pipeline, which is the indexing of the data. So if you have a huge amount of data, like you said, like many documents, legal documents, giving all that to the context of the model is first is too much, and second, it's shown that certain models, or most of the models, the performance or the quality of the response is worse if you give all this context, all these words, all these documents. And this indexing process, this offline pre-processing before using the pipeline, is to enhance that, to kind of create pieces of the contents in a smart way and indexing them so that the pipeline, when it comes to the request, the query, it can do a proper search. Is that right?
Yes, I think there is still a huge part of, let's say, data cleansing, if you like. I think that's usually how we refer to it. I think there is this saying, like 80% of data analytics is actually cleaning the data. It's this Pareto law that when you're doing data analytics, really, like 80% of it, you're trying to get your data in the right form so that you can do whatever processing you want to do on it, whatever analysis. And in this case, you're just trying to please your LLM and somehow work around its constraints. It could be that it could be that you have more data than the context allows, or it could be that you're giving too much context, too so much in the context that, let's say, it gets confused, with air quotes, but it has so much stuff that it doesn't know what to focus on. Let's put it that way. And so a good chunk of it when you're doing RAG would be getting your data in the right shape, using the right indexing strategy, as we said, maybe embeddings, so that you get some specific vectors out of the different parts of your knowledge base in a way that then the LLM can retrieve easily based on whatever query came in. And now if you compare it to MCP, because we know we mentioned it a few times, and we mentioned tool use in general. I think we can just mention tool use in general now, but also specifically then for MCP, how it works for MCP. The difference is that tool use is very structured. So the idea of tool use is a function in the same way as you could intend it in maths, or in programming in general, right? You've got a certain set of arguments for that function. So let's go on with this example we've been doing now. You could have a function that says get tax code. Yes, that could be a function. Now in MCP terms, that would be a resource actually. It wouldn't be a a function. This is not a method. It's a resource because it's read only. It's no side effect, but it doesn't matter so much right now. The point is, your LLM, you can tell your LLM, look, I need to figure out this thing. How does this thing work in Switzerland with taxes in Switzerland? And give the option to the LLM to say, if you don't know the answer, you can call this function called getTaxCode, and as a parameter, you can provide the name of the country. So this would be a function that can somehow, maybe would be a human pasting the result in. It doesn't make sense, but it could be whatever, right?
Yeah.
But you're telling the AI, look, I need you to solve this problem and give me the most likely answer to this problem. But if you're lacking the data to do that, tell me the countries for which you need the tax code, and I will give it to you, basically.
Mm-hmm.
So you're letting the LLM call a tool effectively means that the controlling loop, the outside loop, the one invoking the LLM, is injecting something in the prompt. It is writing into the prompt that if the tool needs to do something as an answer, instead of giving the final answer, let's say, it can go back to the system controlling the LLM and say, can you please give me the results of the tax code? And maybe this is not too different from the way even a professional works, right?
Mm-hmm.
If you go to a lawyer, maybe it's not their specialty, or maybe they work on many things. So maybe you ask them a very specific question, and maybe they know already, or maybe they're not quite sure because they say, yeah, but maybe my understanding is not the most up to date. So before they give you a final answer, okay, maybe they don't ask you specifically because you would be the customer, but they would maybe ask their assistant or whoever, somebody in their context, to go and fetch the most recent tax code, for example. And the difference here is that the part around RAG is that it's even more generic. So in that case, you can have many strategies. Now we gave a very structured one. It's a very specific one. Somehow you had to index all your resources. They are very well defined. So it's saying, okay, this is the tax code for Switzerland. So it's a very maybe atomic entity. Or maybe it isn't. Probably it's much more complex than that. I'm oversimplifying because I'm not a lawyer. I know too little about taxes. But the idea is that you have a very specific
read a book
thing.
about it.
I didn't read a book. I don't think I will. I did consider studying law at some point. But
luckily for me, you didn't.
Maybe I should have. And now we would have funding, probably.
Probably.
But the difference then, as we said, from tool use, which is as a very structured thing, compared to RAG, RAG is just a more generic concept. But let's just say that in general, the way it works in general is that it is more similar, let's say, to a search engine. Let's put it that way, even though it would be maybe the wrong analogy. Because, of course, modern LLM systems, or agent systems, can also use search engines, and that's a better analogy. But in the end, it's about searching unstructured data. So giving the LLM yet another tool. It's another tool in their toolbox saying, if you don't know about this, you can go search this knowledge base for pieces of text that can be relevant to the query. And then you've got these embeddings, so these vectors that you can find the closest vector, so the closest parts in this n-dimensional space based on the specific content of the text, and say, okay, this part seems to be the most relevant, so I'll grab this one and that one, throw them in the context, try to generate my answer. This is RAG. Now, if you become more specific, again, you get tool use. So it's more about, these are the tools in your toolbox. One could be fetching the tax code. Another could be fetching the resources I've got in my Cloudflare account. I don't know if you saw this one. I actually had this example in my pull request that we mentioned before.
Mm-hmm.
something I did last week, and this is real convenience of MCP, of the model context protocol, is that it is a protocol, so it defines a very structured way to create this interface, to interface different systems. The nice thing about the model context protocol is that it gives you a way to do function call in general and make it available to any other client that already speaks the MCP protocol. So in this example, again, let's go back to my pull request now. This is a very concrete example. I'm using Cursor. In this scenario, this is our MCP client. So Cursor has got its LLM models that can call tools, that can do crazy things. They are actually Claude. So Claude is the LLM provider. Sometimes it's ChatGPT. It actually can switch between one and the other. Cursor is the interface, is the client, is the one I'm talking to. And Cursor is also an MCP client. To an MCP client, you can provide MCP servers. Any tool that you want to make available to Cursor can be defined as an MCP server. For example, I needed Cursor to do something based on resources I had in my Cloudflare account. So I've got my cloud account. In our Cloudflare account, we are deploying our
everything.
SAP. I mentioned the database before. It's our cloud service, right? So that's where we host our infrastructure.
Cloudflare, if you're listening to this, please sponsor us. Thank you.
And in this case specifically, I wanted Cursor to, I don't remember what it was, but it needed to know something coming from my Cloudflare account. How would it know? Like, how could it access that? Either I had to go and try to fetch that info in some semi-structured way and paste it in, or I could define an MCP server. One already existed, in fact, so I didn't have to implement anything. I just had to tell Cursor, if you need something from Cloudflare, just run this MCP server. If you got any question about Cloudflare, you just need to run this. And the way MCP servers work is that they define two core concepts, well, three actually, but problems. Two core concepts: resources to get things. So if you've got a list of things that you want your AI to find, it can go to the MCP server and say, "Hey, give me your list of resources." It could be like files in a file system, right? It could be, in this case, in Cloudflare, it could be the different domain names that we have, the different websites that we have hosted. And it's got this structured way then to call the function and get the resource back, again, into the LLM context, into the LLM prompt, so that it can give me a more precise answer. Or it can invoke tools, which can even create side effects. So let's say, again, now we're talking about Cloudflare. Maybe it's not the best examples because there are better ways to do it. But let's say I want to deploy something in Cloudflare. So I want to run a specific action against the Cloudflare account. Instead of figuring out myself what the specific invocation is, or specifically because I want the LLM to do something, get the response from that action, and maybe do something else based on it, I can again tell the LLM to do it through the MCP server. So the LLM can then define what function it should call in the MCP server, invoke it, get some result back, and then go on with this iteration of prompting and answering that it's actually doing itself, so it's automating that part. And I guess you can imagine where we're going to now. I think why so much hype around MCP? Why is it so revolutionary? And being just a protocol, I mean,
it opens up many opportunities.
So many things, right?
Yeah.
So many things that you could interface with. It's all, you could say it's almost as revolutionary as remember the explosion of REST APIs, right? Anything that you could do before, maybe in some specific services, when it was finally available over the internet with REST APIs, you could start integrating so many things, come up with new ideas, new automations. And in this case, you basically get a bridge onto that world, right? You get the chance to give the LLM, you give the LLM access to structured things, to tool usage, so they can actually influence something in the outside world. They can learn about something, come up with a plan, come up with a strategy, maybe with reasoning model, and then actually execute on that plan, get some feedback, and iterate.
We actually have a prospect this week. We need to present this solution to them, and maybe we should release this episode before that so we can send it to them. But yeah, let's discuss that offline. We are already in the hour duration. I think we should wrap it up already if we want to stick to the plan of 1 hour tops, right?
Yeah, makes sense.
I think you found this episode interesting. We talked about many different things. Maybe it got a bit technical. I mean, keep in mind one thing, and I have to give it to Giorgio here. We didn't prepare anything. Like the topics we discussed today, we didn't prepare anything. We just improvised. So talking about RAG and MCP on the fly without preparation, trying to make it simple so non-IT people can understand more or less the concept is quite hard. So if you're a hater, an IT hater, please be nice. So we know we were oversimplifying the concepts here, but it's also because we don't really know yet our target audience, right? So if non-IT people want to listen to this podcast, we need to cover both sides, right? And so, yeah, as I said, please, respectful and nice.
Because we piss everyone off, right? The
yes.
real AI experts will say, well, we are saying bullshit.
Those guys don't have any clue.
Yeah, we're trying to simplify, we're trying to... And then there will be what this guy's even talking about. Feel like we are high. Not to mention the fact this morning I woke up at 6 because construction site in front of me, they started working at 6 on Monday morning.
We're in Switzerland.
So I'm...
So yeah, as I said, I hope you found it useful, and yeah, hear you back next week.